Yes, everybody, welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for yet another episode of the UNC Football Show, with obviously a heavy emphasis and a look ahead to Carolina's matchup on Saturday, first road game of the season up in Boone against Appalachian State, noon kickoff in Kidd Brewer Stadium. So we'll be previewing that towards the end. We got a fun show ahead, going to be kind of recapping some of the press conferences on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday before we dive into that matchup. And then obviously towards the end, offer our predictions on what we'll think will happen on Saturday. So AJ, before we dive into specifics, we're going to start with Monday's press conference here in a little bit. But when you just think of the overall task ahead for Carolina and just the overall week going into it, I know it's pretty exciting for, I think, both fan bases going into this game, but what are just your overall thoughts on the task and the challenge that lays ahead for Carolina this weekend?
Well, the challenge right now is getting better. They'll deal with App when they get there. They obviously have a plan. They've installed the plan on both sides of the ball, but they're at a stage in the building of this team, the building of this program, and in this part of the season where it's got to get better. Mm-hmm. You know, they really can't worry about a lot of things. They did a lot of good stuff in the win over FAMU, and they did some things that weren't so good. And we're told, we talked to a bunch of players Tuesday evening, about what went wrong, especially guys on defense, and they say they cleaned it up. They say they fixed it. A lot of it was simple stuff in coverage, and they got it fixed. And a lot of it was just a quarterback that got rid of the ball quickly. Well, if that's the recipe to beat you and it's now on film, as Charlton Warren tells the kids, that's your resume. Mm-hmm. That's your resume now. Well, who's to stop other teams from doing the same thing? So you can't just say, well, they just got rid of the ball quickly, we're okay otherwise. Well, if everybody gets rid of the ball quickly, then you're not okay until you learn how to fix it. So that has been one of the missions this week. There have been some things offensively. They got to run block better. They have to figure out the right side of that line. Jonathan Adorno played pretty well, and the running on that side was better when he was in the game than William Barnes. We'll have to wait and see Saturday what that distribution of snaps is going to look like there at right guard. Mm-hmm. And also Spencer Rollins' growth as he could. This won't be FAMU. That FAMU was an athletic version of what he faced in the Ivy League, right? So this week's going to be a much, much higher step for him. How does he handle 75 reps going into a game like this? A lot of those kind of things. Drake May said there was a lot for him to learn. Said his feet weren't settled enough, and you could see it on some of the missed throws, but he said it was the case in some of the hit throws as well. And your feet need to be set when you're going up against a club that has dudes that can come get you. And that's what Apple do. They'll try to go get them. So there are a lot of things that they need to get better at. Otherwise, they would have beaten FAMU 85-0, and they didn't. It was a game going in the fourth quarter. So they're a long way away from whatever it is they're going to be. And they've got a massive speed bump in the way right now that could impede that progress. So that's the test this week. They're playing a good team on the road. If you throw out all of the extracurriculars, the zoo that's going to be there, the environment, the emotional component for the App people, the biggest thing ever happened in Boone, all that kind of stuff, and just narrow it down to a football game, it's still a monumental task for this team because of where it is in its process versus a club that is well into its process. That's a program that knows itself. They're old dudes. They're experienced dudes. There's a lot of them. Carolina doesn't have as much of that. So this is a big task. They know it. So this week's focus, get better.
Agreed. I mean, that's got to be the number one focus. And I like how you said test, because it is going to be a test for the Tar Heels. And we'll obviously dive into why a little bit later in the show when we go a little more in depth on Appalachian State. But AJ, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast before we keep this one moving, and that is myperfectfranchise.net. You guys have heard of them, and you know we love them. So, guys, if you're a displaced corporate executive wanting to put your career in your own hands, you know, with the economy just being so many question marks right now, the job market, all that stuff, if you've ever thought about opening a franchise and taking your career path and putting it in your own hands, now is the time to do so with My Perfect Franchise, and more specifically, their founder and owner, Andy Ludick. He's a long-term Rivals member, die-hard college football fan, huge Mac Brown fan as well, and most importantly, a franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses throughout his career. So using his expertise, he helps others find their American dream through a very thorough and keyword-free consultation process. So guys, call Andy. It's 100% free. You can put your life and career in your own hands. Just visit myperfectfranchise.net. I know there's so many of us that have driven around and see these franchises popping up all over the place. And I know me, I've always wondered, how do you go about opening or owning one of those? And if you ever thought about doing so, Andy can help you do that. And again, 100% free consultation process. You don't have to pay anything just to see if this is the right step for you. Great time to do it as well with all the uncertainty. It's always a great time to take your career in your own hands. So again, guys, links in the description below. Find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. And if you do end up talking to him, make sure you tell Andy that Tar Heel Illustrated sent you. AJ, I want to go recap. We're going to follow kind of the same format we did for those people who did watch our UNC football show last week ahead of the FAMU game. So following the format that we did last week, I want to go all the way back in time to Monday. We're recording this one on Wednesday. Let's go back to Monday's press conference. You got to talk to Mack Brown and the coordinators as well. Biggest thing that kind of jumped out to me, and I know there's a lot of storylines. We'll hit on some other things that Mack talked about, not only on Monday, but on Wednesday a little bit later down the line. So I think the main thing that stood out for me in terms of just maybe a worry going into Boone is the status of Josh Downs and Tony Grimes. If there's anything else that stood out from Monday, AJ, after I kick it to you, feel free to go in depth on it. But when I think about those guys being questionable still, I know their status is kind of up in the air going into it. You're talking about your best receiver, and essentially, I know it's kind of a tight call between Storm Duck and Tony Grimes, but one of, if not your best cornerback as well, going up on the road to Boone. If Carolina's without those guys, those are huge, just massive losses for this team. So, AJ, what are your thoughts on kind of the uncertainty that surrounds them, and how big of a loss could that potentially be for the Tar Heels?
Well, we don't know what their status will be until Saturday. That's what they told us. They're going to monitor them during the week. There were some people complaining that we didn't ask questions about it during the press conference. What they do is before we start recording Mac, Jeremy will give an injury update.
Yeah.
And they don't talk about injuries. If Mac wants to tell us something, for example, he said Legend Cavazos has practiced all week. He's told us that Wednesday morning, and he's available. He told us that Antoine Green's coming along, that he was actually catching some passes and doing some stuff Wednesday morning. He'll volunteer things, but they're not going to get into specifics. And if they tell you at the outset of Mac's press conference that they'll monitor them all week and, they'll figure something, they have to figure something out by noon Saturday. So what I do, and this is one of the reasons why you should come over to our site and be on the boards in pregame, because I put a lot of information there. You know what I do. You've been with me. I look at each position group when they're warming up. I look to see who's not there. And of course, if I know that some guys are being monitored during the week, I'm going to be looking for number 11 and number 1 because Grimes is wearing number 1 now in defense. So I'm going to look for them and we'll find out. Now, if they don't have either one of them, I think that that's huge because nobody else has stepped up in the receiver room. It's going to take time before we really know what the rest of that room looks like. And I think some of the issues that Carolina had in coverage the other night was because Grimes went down. It wasn't the first 2 possessions so much. It was after that when he went down that FAMU had some success throwing. And they threw Dante Balfour out there, and he hadn't really played before. So that was a huge situation for him just to kind of stop the head from spinning so much and kind of get his feet under him, if you will. I don't want to be too trite with those sayings, but that's the case. If Grimes was out there, I think it would have been a slightly different story. So they need to have them both, period. They need to have them both. And we'll find out Saturday morning. So make sure you go to THI in our pregame thread, which will go up at about 10:50 in the morning. I'll have it in there. And if I see them warming up, I will give an account of what they look like. And we may even shoot a couple quick little videos and pop them out on Twitter, our Twitter handle, which is @Heel Illustrated.
Yep. Links to both of those in the description below, guys. So seriously, make sure you come over before games. A lot of good stuff goes in that pregame thread if you're a premium subscriber. So head on over there and check that out. So AJ, I want to now move on to Tuesday. And I don't really have a specific, you heard from 6 players on Tuesday. I don't really have a specific thing that I want to focus on from hearing from those 6 guys, but you were there in the flesh. To you, anything that stood out, I know you got to talk to Drake May and, like I said, 5 other guys, but anything from those press conferences that maybe you stood out or got you thinking as you drove home to Raleigh after Chapel Hill?
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting. When we got Power Eccles Wednesday morning, so basically 7 players. He had a class Tuesday evening. So anytime we get him usually it's Tuesday players is the day for players in the evening. But some of the guys have classes, so we'll get them Wednesday morning before MAC, and Wednesdays are on Zoom. Mm-hmm. So 7 players. But when you think about it, Power's a true sophomore. We never really got him last year. We got him once or twice maybe last year. We never got Boykins until now. Spencer Rollins just got there. We never got Nesbitt during the season last year. We never got Drake May during the season last year, except after the Wofford game. What I'm saying is they're going into an environment this week, and the dudes that we were talking to are guys that haven't done this. And if they've been on these trips, there wasn't a whole lot asked of them. Drake said he learned something when they went to Virginia Tech last year, but he didn't play. He wasn't out there. Nesbitt had a couple of reps out there. Boykins may have gotten on the field in special teams or maybe a couple plays at nickel or something. They're very green right now. They're a very green. Spencer Rollins, his biggest game was Harvard-Yale, and if you got to watch the interview with Spencer Rollins, by the way, because it's really, really interesting stuff. But the most intense game he's played in was the Harvard-Yale game, which they call the game, which is actually historically a huge part of college football history. And if you like college football history, you should read up on it. Mm-hmm. But he said that those games, the students wouldn't come in until second half because they're tailgating the whole first half. So the second half was what really mattered. So there's a lot of newness here, and they're going to go into a place that's just different. You got to climb up the mountain, as you know, Jacob. You got to go into Kid Brewer Stadium. Yeah. It's a different bird up there, man.
It is.
Those people are going to be frothing at the mouth. They're bringing in 10,000 extra seats. It's noon, but they'll be good and liquored up by noon. Trust me. So they have a lot of guys that they're going to rely on to play like mature players and also handle the week maturely up to that haven't been asked to do it before. I think that's highly fascinating right now. Mm-hmm. And that's why, as a journalist covering this team, they're really interesting, very interesting. And I think as a head coach for Mac Brown, he ain't gonna sleep a wink Friday night because he's got no earthly idea what the heck's going to roll out there on the field Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, he basically said that in his press conference on Wednesday too. And AJ, I'll add this because for those who don't know, I went to school at Appalachian State, and I was a member of the sports radio team for a couple of years while I was up there. It was a school radio station, so we got to cover some App State games and all that jazz. And I was actually on the field for the Wake Forest and Miami games that App State had. I believe it was my junior and senior year up there. 2 massive games, very similar, both noon kickoffs, ACC opponents. And, they've done some reconstruction and expanding on their stadium, so it seats even more people now. But the atmosphere is there, the tailgating, the just love of football in the program that App State fans have is really interesting to see. And I'll never forget being on the field for those games because the atmosphere in a stadium, no, it's not, back then probably half the size of Kenan Stadium, was rocking. I mean, it was loud. There was a ton of people. And they ended up losing both those games. So I've been able to kind of see similar matchups, years ago with ACC teams and just the atmosphere going into the game. And, Miami getting off the bus and App State fans being right out there to, well, I don't know if welcome's the right word, but welcome them into the stadium. So it is a challenge. It is tough, and it can be a daunting environment for a young team, and especially a team like Carolina who's relying on so many young guys. And AJ, that's a segue into what I want to talk about from Wednesday's press conference as well. Now, if you guys go back and listen to some of the comments that Max made this week, if you didn't know any better and you didn't know anything about App, you didn't know anything about Carolina, anything about logos or colors or what shirts these coaches are wearing, and you listened to a Mac Brown press conference this week and all you knew was, you got a Sunbelt team and you got an ACC program, you would almost think that Mac is the coach of App State and he's talking about a program like Carolina in the ACC, because the way he's talking about his team chances going up there is, essentially we're underdogs. They've got a 6-year quarterback. We've got a rookie quarterback. They've got some experienced guys on the field. We got a lot of young guys we're relying on. Essentially they're really good at home. we're 5-10 in road games since I came back and didn't win a single road game last season. So, and a lot of this stuff is true. You know, App has built up a good program over there. They're a program that's won national championships at the FBS level. So they know what it takes, FCS level, excuse me. They know what it takes to win, and they've always had a winning culture up there. So in a lot of ways, some of the things he is saying is true. Mac's trying to get Carolina back to a spot similar to when he left them, of competing at that national stage. But I think for me, that's the most interesting part of going back, not only listen to Mac's press conference on Wednesday, but his Monday press conference. He's painting this team out, Carolina I'm talking about, as the underdogs. They've got to go up there, and essentially they're going into a really hostile environment, and they've got to spoil the party. Essentially, I'm sitting here listening to Mac like, hey, if we lose up there, don't be surprised. That's what it sounds like to me. So AJ, what are your takes on his comments in the situation at hand? Because I do think it is very interesting coming from a Carolina head coach talking about a Sun Belt program.
And I don't think, some people might say, well, he's setting the fan base up for a loss. I don't think coaches do that.
Yeah, I don't think so either, no.
I don't think that's the case at all. But what did he say that's not true?
Yeah, it's true.
Look, if App didn't go into Chapel Hill and win in 2019, then you could at least play that, well, we're the ACC and you're the Sun Belt card. You're really not that good. But what's North Carolina's history? They lost their last 3 games to East Carolina and got trashed in all 3 of them. And they lost at home to App State 3 years ago. I don't really think Carolina's in position to play that tune.
No.
It doesn't have a tune to play. And that doesn't mean that it won't have a tune to play at some point, but so far it hasn't. And Mac is correct. Look, Mac is 18-17 in his return against FBS teams. Last year, they lost 5 road games. And I'll tell you what, they lost some games to teams that are worse than App State. They lost to Georgia. They got clobbered by Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's terrible. They lost at Virginia Tech. And I know you could say atmosphere and they've got athletes, all that kind of stuff. But I'd be willing to bet you that App State was comparable to Virginia Tech last year or better. Mm-hmm. And this year, I think people think App's going to be a lot better this year than a year ago.
Yeah.
There's 21 guys on their depth chart that are 5th or 6th year players. And I told you what I did, and I have a piece coming out Thursday. I actually went and crunched the numbers. Mm. And if you look at their depth chart, they have almost 26,000 snaps.
It's crazy.
At the FBS level on their depth chart. And that doesn't include an FCS transfer on both offense and defense, 2 guys that were 3-year starters in all conference where they came from before. One was from Austin Peay, an offensive lineman, and he's a backup. Another one is I think a DB from Central Connecticut State. They were all conference 3-year starters at the FCS level. So if you're glad to have Spencer Rolland, then you understand what those guys mean to their team. Similar situation, but Spencer's the clear starter. So that's 489 snaps. 54 guys on their depth chart have played in an FBS game. And the average is 489 college snaps for their career for each one of those guys. Their 5th string running back, I think his name is Daytrick Harrington. Mm-hmm. He has more career snaps, 5th string running back, more career snaps than UNC's entire running back room combined.
That's a wild stat. It really is.
So yeah, I think Mac knows this. He's trying to let people know this is a challenge. Mm. This is an enormous challenge. The nation's going to look at this and say, oh my goodness, they're going up there. That's so cool. They're going there. And they're giving them that game. I know this because I got friends that are saying that. One of my buddies texted me last week and said, man, I can't believe Carolina's going to App State. How cool is that? And I'm like, yeah, well, they might get their butts handed to them.
Yeah, it's a tough matchup. Yeah.
You never know. I mean, this is a huge matchup. And if Carolina loses, people around the nation are going to laugh. Oh, they lost to App State. Ha, ha, ha. Well, App State should be favored because they're at home, because they know who they are. The culture is so solid there. They're confident. They're older. They've got guys that have won a lot. They have a winning culture. So yeah, but Carolina's more talented, a lot more talented when you just look at the rawness of it. But they are raw. I just noted a few minutes ago about the youth and inexperience of the guys we talked to Tuesday and Power Echoes Wednesday morning about how they're not a bunch of been there, done that guys. Mm-hmm. Not really at all. So they have to go experience things like this to become been there, done that guys. They're not there yet. So I think Mac is right. I don't think he's trying to soften the base for a letdown. I prep him for a letdown. I think he's seeing it the way a coach sees things. He sees 1,000 different ways his team can lose this game, but he also knows there's 1,000 different ways they can win this game because they've got dudes. They got a lot of dudes, but the dudes need to play more like dudes than they did against FAMU. And if they do that, and if they stop the run, I think they can win this game. If they stop the run, they win the game.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into the game in a minute, but I wanted to go kind of full throttle there on Mac's comments because I think they're totally genuine. I don't think it's coach speak. I don't think it's Nick Saban saying we got to fear Vandy in Nashville. I don't think it's that at all. It's not that situation at all. This is a legitimate test for North Carolina's football program, which has won more than 8 games one time since Mac Brown left in 1997. So, and App has done 9 or more every year since it joined FBS.
Yeah. Won conference championships since they made the leap as well. I mean, basically anybody on that roster is either they did lose the championship game last year to Louisiana, who was a great team, but basically anybody on that roster right now, unless you're a true freshman, has either participated in a conference title game or has won.
Everybody that's been in that program, anybody that's spent 4 years in that program in the last 20 some odd years has some kind of a ring.
Yeah. And that's the culture and just the, how good.
And that's not just winning in-state games, getting a ring either, right?
No.
Is that a dig?
Yeah.
It's not a dig.
No.
And I'm not making that as a dig. I know it'd be taken that way, but it's to illustrate tangible championships of some kind.
Yeah.
And I have nothing wrong with Carolina doing that, by the way. I think you should celebrate when you need to celebrate. I'm all for that.
Agreed. I couldn't agree more, AJ. Let's move on and dive into a little bit more about the matchup in this one. And we've already kind of hit on the challenge that awaits Carolina. Let's talk about why this is a challenge a little more specifically. So looking back at App State last year, 10-4, 7-1 in the Sun Belt, 7-0 at home. Obviously, Carolina, we've talked about it nauseum since last season, 0-5 on the road. So this is historically a great team in Kidd Brewer Stadium. Picked to win the East Division in the Sun Belt this season, one ahead of Coastal Carolina. We know how good they've been over the past few years as well. Diving more into specifics of players, 2 players on all-conference preseason first team in the Sun Belt. That's offensive lineman, Cooper Hodges, and running back Cameron Peoples. 6 players on the second team, most notably quarterback Chase Bryce, who Clemson transfer, was at Duke for a little bit. Guys, Carolina fans will remember that game a few years ago, and has been at App State. I believe it's his second year, and running back Nate Noel. So just looking at that right there, you got a quarterback, an offensive lineman, and 2 running backs on the first and second team preseason Sun Belt teams. I think it tells you where the strength lies in terms of that offense. Kevin Barbie in his first year as offensive coordinator and the quarterback's coach came from Central Michigan. That's something to keep an eye on. You got a first-year offensive coordinator. How does that work and gel in the first game? And lost just 1 starter on the offensive line. AJ, you said it. You took the words right out of my mouth. I have it written right here. The key to victory for Carolina, you have to stop the run. Another reason why that's so important, Apps lost 3 of their top receivers from last season. I believe their leading receiver that's returning to this year's team only caught about 250 yards worth of passes last year. So if they're forced to dip into that wide receiver core and throw the ball more, you would think even if there is a couple of young corners out there for Carolina, especially if Tony Grimes can't go, that would be a strength for this team. Another key to victory real quickly, AJ, got to give Drake May time. Not a ton of production / size on that defensive line for App State, and 5 of their 7 top tacklers from last season are gone. So I think if you can give Drake May some time up there, Carolina can definitely put some points up. I know I just threw a lot at everybody and a lot.
Yeah. Let me dive into that.
They're a good team. They're a good team, man. They really are.
Yeah. Remember what I said in our 3 things on the field at 1:20 something in the morning, Saturday night / Sunday morning, about don't yell, don't cuss on Twitter and tag us if the freshmen aren't on the field at running back a lot, especially early, because because of what you just said, I could see App dialing up all kinds of stuff, try to get at Drake, try to throw him off.
100%.
Drake said settling feet is a thing. Well, quarterback who's still working on settling his feet is more likely to turn the ball over than one that doesn't. Now, Drake is incredibly talented, but this will be his second start and his first true road test, and it's a different level than FAMU. So if they can get him moving and get him stretched, then they could force turnovers. They could force mistakes, and that's what you want to do. So who do you want back there picking up that stuff and recognizing it and being fully prepared for it? A guy like DJ Jones, who's been through it and who's really smart, knows how to study and prep and all that kind of thing, or two true freshmen, especially one that just got there. I mean, you got to kind of weigh what's important when you're preparing for this game and once you get in there and see how they handle things. So neither Phil Longo nor Mac Brown have said yet that Omarion Hampton, George Pettaway are fantastic in pass protection. They're coming, basically, is what they say. But DJ's there, and Phil pointed that out the other day. So that's one thing. But more so, going up against that offense, I think that's where the key is. If Carolina's going to score some points, but they can't let this thing become a shootout. Mm-hmm. If it becomes a shootout and Chase Bryce suddenly channels the guy that signed with Clemson and the guy that some people thought could be an heir apparent at some point, and actually did, he filled in.
He had some really good
passing
stats
in the game
last year. He really did.
He struggled at Duke, but Gio Biggers. Somebody asked him about that, and he said, "Well, Chase Bryce is a different quarterback now than at Duke because he's got a lot more around him. He's got a running game. Number one, Duke had no running game, so Carolina kind of knew he's just going to chuck it so they could get their timing down and everything else. When you're running a lot of play action stuff, you could throw to the tight ends, you could throw the short things, you can pull the defense in directions you want to go, and then kind of skip against it. So I could see stuff like that happening, but they do that if they have success running the ball. So Carolina must stop the run. They must stop the run, force Chase Bryce to beat him with his arm. Odds are probably pretty good if you're a Carolina fan that you're going to come away with a win if that's the case. However, Bryce is in his 6th year. He's a guy who's seen a ton of film. He has seen Carolina's athletes. He saw ACC athletes. He practiced against Clemson dudes for years. So I don't think any of that stuff's going to phase him whatsoever. And he could have a huge game. If he does, then Carolina could be in trouble. Yeah. So those are some of the things that stand out to me. But, it's interesting. They are kind of inexperienced at wide receiver. Yeah. But you pointed out exactly. It's all the stuff up front and it's the ground game. Mm-hmm. If the Tar Heels are expecting a very physical game, they're expecting a mano-a-mano type thing. They're expecting to get banged up and to try to bang up App. App's going to try to win the game that way. Dina actually thinks it's going to be a shootout, by the way.
I think it could be.
She's not doing snap picks, but she's like, it's going to be a shootout. It might be a shootout, but I think App's chances improve if it is a shootout. I think Carolina's defense has to show up. Agreed. Those guys that are there, they have 21 4- and 5-star guys on defense. I know a lot of them are really, really young, but I had an interesting conversation with somebody yesterday waiting for the press conferences to start about talent versus scheme and experience. And scheme and experience mean an awful lot. But, man, if you're talented and you just go balls out and you make plays and you properly are prepared for a game, talent should ultimately win out. Carolina has more talent. Mm-hmm. They really do. Mm-hmm. But they're wet behind the ears, and the guys over on the other side have been shaving for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, they got a bunch of dudes that are probably going to be voting the second time coming up here, Guys that can drink for a long time. They can vote. Some of them might be married. Carolina's guys, they're all just, changing hairstyles every year still.
Yeah, man. Exactly. They're definitely not going to the bar and buying a beer, at least.
They're just trying to figure out who they are. They're just trying to figure out who they are. What, DeAndre Boykins, everyone's called him Dre now. Are we supposed to call him Dre? We're still learning about these guys. Yeah. The dudes over at App, those stories have been told.
100%, man. AJ, I want to ask you this real quick, and then we'll move on to prediction before we wrap this one up. You hit on it right there. When you look at Carolina, you got such a young offense as a whole going up there. And you got some experienced guys over there, but as a whole, you got a young offense. Then you look at the defense, you look at, maybe underperforming a little bit last week, but you look at the experience that the defense has, just the veteran guys that they have in terms of guys who just played more snaps. I know there's some young guys in that cornerback room and a couple of young guys in the rotation, but overall, a lot more experience on that side of the ball than the offense. I don't know if pressure is the right word, but is the pressure, I should say, on Carolina's defense to go up there and perform as a lot of people expect them to be because of how young and inexperienced not only Drake May is, but the offense is as a whole.
I think the pressure's on every aspect of Carolina's team. North Carolina, you're supposed to win this game.
Yep.
In North Carolina in year 4, Mac Brown, you're absolutely supposed to win this game. And again, I've already said all the things I need to say that are complimentary about App State. If App State wins, I won't be surprised. A lot of people will be. But if you're in year 4 of Mac Brown and his mission was to come back and return the program to where it was when he left, but take it one step further, well, if you lose in Boone and you're 0-2 against App since the return, I as much as I respect App, as much as I know this would be a very big challenge for Carolina, it's going to be difficult to continue the sales pitch as it has been. The fans are already a little bit skeptical, okay? And I understand why. Like I said, Mac's 18-17 against FBS teams. I do think a part of that is it's just the process, okay? And it takes a while to figure out what coaches you want to have in there and to figure out what schemes you're comfortable with, especially when he was out for 5 years. We talked all year long last year. The value in year 3 for Mac was he was learning so many things he didn't want in his program, from a scheme to certain approaches and everything else. And those things have been changed. But you can't lose it out. And tell everybody you're still that program. Then you go 18-18 FBS games. That's just the way things are. Personally, I still think they can achieve all their goals, even if they lose this game. But I look at things through a different lens. There's no emotion here. The fan base will be very, very disappointed if they lose this game. If you're App and you lose at home to Carolina, well, what a great environment you have. What a great game day you had. You sold 40,000 tickets. You almost beat the Tar Heels. You're not supposed to beat them anyway. You could still win the Sun Belt, get rings, and you're good. But I think for Carolina, they'll be really tight going to Georgia State if they come off a loss. And my goodness, if they lose that, they're 1-2 at Notre Dame coming in, then the conversation changes. With a win, I think you can sell a lot of things about growth and overcoming that environment with all these young, unproven guys. And then the task next week would be respecting Georgia State, taking them seriously, because that's a losable game too. So, in Carolina history, it wouldn't be surprising to see them go into Boone and win, and then go down to Atlanta and lose to Georgia State, right?
It really wouldn't be.
So, I think right now, for me personally, just watching this program and watching this team, I hate to be trite, but it's a one game at a time thing because of the newness, because of so many question marks that are looming over. And I just find it fascinating that they have another lab. This will be their second lab of the year, where we get to look and see what's up, what things mix well, what things don't mix well, what stays in the lab that you use the next week, what doesn't. That's the process that they're in right now. I find it very interesting from a football junkie standpoint and a journalist standpoint covering the program. But fans don't care about that. They just want to win. And Carolina fans do not want to go up there and lose to those guys for a second time in 4 seasons. So it's going to be really interesting. I think the pressure's on Carolina, and if App opens up well, I think the Tar Heels could have some issues. It's really important Carolina gets out and plays well right out of the gate. Yeah. They got to get some stops. They got to make Chase Bryce think he's back at Duke. And seriously, they got to be physical. They got to show them some of that sideline to sideline speed and get in their heads a little bit and kind of quiet that crowd a little bit. That's an absolute must for Carolina.
Big test of weights, AJ. Big test of weights. End of it. Wrapping it up right here. Prediction time. I got my staff pick in a little early today. Not as early as last week. That's my bad.
You, by the way, you were you're always first. You were first last year.
I try to set the tone. I try to set the tone for everybody else. Try to lead by example.
You're the pace car, right?
Yeah. I try to.
We're going to be near Wilkes. We won't be too far from Wilkesboro, so we could call you the pace car, right?
They've actually opened that raceway back up and done some things there. I've heard. I don't think I'm making that up. So that's a heck of an analogy right there. You're not lying.
It should be back there. Yeah. But anyway, that's a different topic for a different.
Yeah,
day.
different.
I'm not really a NASCAR guy, but there should be a race there.
100%. They're 100, especially with the history of NASCAR in Appalachia, which we won't go in depth here to talk about. But
we've already gone too long. What's your pick?
You're not lying. I said 31-24 Carolina. I think there's going to be some missed field goals for both teams. That's just how I feel.
Wow.
I think it's going to happen. I think special teams is going to be huge for both teams. I did say on my staff picks, I didn't say it's a coin toss, but I said I'm not incredibly confident in this pick. But I think overall, Carolina's going to be up to the task. I think they're going to play a little bit better. And another reason I'm predicting Carolina to win is I mentioned Wake Forest and Miami games that I went to when I was at App. Carolina App was just absolutely obliterated by Miami in that game at noon, rocking atmosphere, never stood a chance. And in the Wake Forest game, they kind of found a way to lose. They missed multiple field goals and had a chance to win the game with the last second field goal. And I think they missed the first attempt, got a flag, got to do it again, and missed that one too. So App historically in these tough noon games against ACC opponents has not been able to find a way to win. That's another reason I'm pretty confident that Carolina will go up there and do it, but it's going to be a really, really tough one. 31-24 for me. What do you got, AJ?
I think App's going to win a lot of the snaps, but Carolina's got the big play guys. I think the big play guys are going to make big plays.
Okay.
So I think Drake's going to have another big game. I think he's really, really good, and he's going to find dudes to do stuff. I don't know how App covers Carolina's tight ends.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Of those 54 guys I was talking about, 34 on offense, 20 on defense. So there aren't as many guys over there. So some of the matchup, Carolina could present some matchup issues, which I think tight end does. I think Carolina has a huge advantage there. I think they can march down the field with those guys, and I think that they will. And it'll be fairly high scoring, but not a shootout. So I see Carolina in the 42 to 27 range. I guess 20 years ago, that's a shootout. Mm-hmm. But today, that's not really a shootout. But that's kind of the way I see things. But it would not surprise me in the least bit to see Carolina get punched around a little bit and lose a close game up there.
Yeah,
I can't wait. I don't know how many stadiums I've covered games in. This is my 27th year. How many arenas? I've never been to Boone.
Really?
Yeah, never been to Boone.
You've never been to the stadium, or you just never been to Boone?
I've never been to Boone.
Oh, wow. I'm surprised.
It's like the only part of the state I've never been to. So shame on me, but I cannot wait to get there. I cannot wait to see the culture and the spirit and the pageantry there. I cannot wait to embrace it. I'm really looking forward to it. It's your alma mater, so that makes it a little bit more special. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the field shooting a game at your alma mater.
I will be there, yeah.
That'll be a cool thing. Kevin Roy, another one of our photographers, is going to be there. His daughter goes to school there. So I'm looking forward to it. I cannot wait to see what this is all about. When I travel, like when I go to stadiums all the time, I went out of my way to go to Charleston Southern Stadium one time. I went out of my way to go to North Florida's gym when I was driving through Jacksonville one time. I'm really weird when it comes to stuff like that because I love college stadiums and arenas. Mm-hmm. Well, now I get to see Kid Brewer Stadium, which I've heard about for years. And it's going to be really neat to see it, especially now renovated, especially with this environment and this matchup. Looking forward to it.
They live and breathe football up there, AJ. This is not a knock on App State fans. They could care less about any other sport up there. Basketball attendance was absolutely horrific when I was in school there. But when it came to football, it was the whole town shut down. So it's going to be.
And they have a nice arena too, right? Because Carolina opened up their arena.
Yeah, great basketball arena.
So think about it. Carolina basketball went there to open the arena, and they're calling this a much, much bigger deal because this is where their bread's buttered. They
live and breathe football up there. And when you look at the history, go look at it, you'll understand why. Yep. I mean, it makes sense. It definitely makes sense. AJ?
They ain't got no Charlie Moores in the basketball side.
They really don't, man. The attendance has gotten better from what I've seen. They brought a new coach in. They're actually, I think they were in the tournament or playing game in the tournament a couple of years ago. They ended up winning their conference tournament too. But when I was in school, I think the average basketball attendance was maybe 1,000 people. It was absolutely horrific, and it was bad. It really was. Football
40,000 Saturday though.
Yeah, 40,000 in that stadium.
It's supposed to be.
That place will be rocking, and I know I'm looking forward to going back up there. And we'll see what happens on Saturday, AJ. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones for another episode of the UNC Football Show, brought to you by TarHeelIllustrated.com. Of course, again, guys, head on over to our website for all your pregame coverage going into the game. Hop on our boards during the game and get in our live chat, especially before the game. We'll give some injury updates and kind of what's going on, some sights and sounds from the game as well. So keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com as always. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well. And let's do this. If you think Carolina's going to go up to Kid Brewer Stadium on Saturday and take care of business, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button below. Let's see how many likes we can get on this video. Again, I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. We appreciate you watching. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.